Hello, everybody. It's the Lawn Gnome, and welcome to your October 2019 episode of Sunday Sit-Downs, the show where anything goes and nothing gets left behind. And I gotta tell you guys, it kind of is funny because the last time we did this episode of Sunday Sit-Downs, it was September 1st. So even though we're not done with October, it has been over a month since we've done this. So it feels really great to be back for another great topic of conversation. And like you have all been watching on my recent videos, because of the fact that it's October, I like to get into the Halloween spirit. So we definitely have a very interesting topic to go within the theme. And to join me for this topic is a very good friend of mine. She hasn't really been making videos recently, but all I will say is that she is someone who has, since the beginning, has been a big supporter of my channel, and I have been a very big supporter of hers because she's unlike any YouTuber out there that you have ever watched, especially when it comes to the BookTube's current community. And that is my friend Hannah from Craving Books. So Hannah, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you're having a good day as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to jump into the conversation.
As am I, because this is definitely a very interesting conversation for certain, because I refer to this as exploring the dark corners. So what exactly does that mean? Well, Hannah's been making some videos about some very interesting pieces of literature, stuff that you probably wouldn't even think about when you're at your local library or even at a Barnes & Noble. But when it comes to the community these days, I know that a lot of you have been making these mentions about the fact that BookTube has been feeling a little bit one note because everybody is basically talking about the same thing. But Hannah has never done that. She has broke the mold many times, and I am just surprised by what she discusses. She discusses very gothic themes, sometimes grotesque, sometimes uncomforting. And even though there are some times where I will admit, I get a little unsettled when I hear some of the passages that she reads in this literature, I am still intrigued. It's like that 50-car pileup on the highway that you just cannot look away from because you're so interested in what's happening. So, as always, I have 7 questions for my guest, and the first one is where we always go, and that's to begin at the beginning. So, Hannah, I will definitely say again, you have dabbled into some very interesting pieces of literature on your channel. And what I want to know is, what put you on this path to discovery?
I thought about this a lot, and it's very difficult to pinpoint, but I mean, I've always stuck out like a sore thumb, never really fit in since I was a child. So because I never really fit in, and because I was never really able to like make really strong friendships, I was often alone. So I would have a lot of time to read, and I would have a lot of time to watch movies that probably were not really appropriate for my age. But my family, I think when they thought I was just so young, they didn't really think I would understand anything, you know. But I've always liked things that were darker, and that may have been part and parcel to a lot of kids thinking, or rather saying, that I was the daughter or spawn of Satan, because that happened all the time when I was a kid. On account of my red hair, I think that was kind of the starting point to like, well, maybe I am really different and I can't fit in, so may as well own it. So I just kind of started dabbling in books that would have like key phrases like devil, death, kill, murder. And I would just check all those out from the library and just start skimming them or reading them. And that's kind of just where it started. And with that, there was this huge rush when you discover something for the first time and it is so out there and it is kind of taboo. You kind of feel like you're sitting on a big secret. So it was more of a I don't know, it was just really enjoyable. So it was it kind of started as like a big rush, and now I'm constantly trying to find that rush again.
Wow. Well, I want to first of all say something. I never appreciate it when people think that people have no soul because they have red hair. I have met a great deal of redheads that I get along with very, very well. And I think one of the funniest things is that my brother was one of those few people, whether it was comedical or if there was actually some truth to his saying, he always said that redheads had no soul, and the gods above graced him with his first child who happens to be a redhead. So that's what you get when you make fun of redheads. I'm just going to let people know that right now. So yeah, with me, I don't know. It's like I had parents that were very wary of what their kids were watching and reading and whatnot. I mean, I personally feel that if I read like a Stephen King novel at a young age, I think my mother probably wouldn't have cared because she just wanted me to read something, because I was never one of those kids that appreciated reading merely because of the fact that like, oh, I'm reading in school, I'm reading all these books. Why do I need to read on my spare time? I just want to watch TV. But at the same time, I was also one of those kids that was never really drawn towards horror movies. And because of my YouTube channel, I've been trying to be the true film appreciator that I am and think that I should be by finally watching all of those movies that are classified as, the classics in all genres, and horror happens to be one of them. So I've been watching all the big favorites, and last year I watched Sam Raimi's Evil Dead for the first time. And
Oh,
that is where I discovered why horror has such an appeal to so many, especially to people who just eat and live cinema. It's because there is such an imagination when it comes to making horror films. You literally throw caution into the wind and all bets are off. You just make something. And the thing that I love so much about the horror genre is that these directors don't care if the movie is done badly or perfectly. They just want to get that idea out there. Another movie that is one of my personal favorites, while it's not horror themed, is Tim Burton's Ed Wood. I actually just watched and reviewed it because it's one of my favorites. He was one of those living embodiments of creators that just said, I just want to get these crazy ideas out into the world, and I want people to just see how my mind works. And I think that that's really what goes into the mind of these authors that make these interesting and crazy ideas for their work, because nobody else is doing something like that. And in a world where there's so many reboots and remakes and rehashes, what have you, it's nice to know that there are still people out there that are trying to be as original as they can, even if it means pushing bars or stepping over boundaries or crossing those lines that people would never dare to cross.
absolutely. Yeah.
So now let's get into the second question, and that is, what was the first piece of this type of literature that you read? Who gave it to you, or did anybody give it to you for that matter? And what was your first initial reaction to what you read?
Well, like I was kind of saying, I spent a lot of time alone and in the library, especially our school library, which was a very progressive library at the time. We had a ton of books that ranged so many different topics. So our librarian, I guess, wasn't really afraid of like exposing kids to maybe darker themes. Um, in terms of like the first piece I read, it's kind of muddled. I mean, when I was in elementary, I read, Goosebumps, for
Oh,
example.
I'm a
Uh,
big fan of those.
yeah, which I think kind of ignited a love and a spark for horror. Um, but I do remember taking out a book, I think it was from the public library. And again, it was during my phase of like just trying to find any books that had the keywords that were, crime, death, whatever. And one of them was, I think it was an America's Most Wanted book, and it was it was a compilation of like these like horrific murders.
Wow.
And I think that's like one of my more vivid memories, I guess, of like the first piece of literature sort of that I read that really, again, kind of ignited this spark of wanting to lift up the veil and dig a little deeper into human nature, which is really what I'm interested in. And I think that's kind of what sparked it, because I love horror. You know, with like watching and reading Goosebumps, and then with watching Are You Afraid of the Dark, I loved the general tone of horror. But really what I liked the most, I think, was the darker side of humanity, and wanting to understand why people do what they do, which is kind of why I read more transgressive literature, and also why I read a lot of, you know, really weird, crazy things too, because I kind of like things that are absurd, and I also like things that are um, very set in reality and might explain why somebody does what they do,
Hmm.
I guess.
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny that you mentioned the fact that that's actually a very interesting book that you discovered at the beginning, because one of the few things that I'm suddenly hearing a lot about, and I don't know whether it's interesting or whether it's just a little bit awkward, but when it comes to some of these great names, even though many would not really classify them as great, but like those well-known names of people in history that have actually committed these horrible acts, like Ted Bundy or the Son of Sam,
Mm-hmm.
there is such an intrigue towards these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because of the fact that there are just so many that want to just dive into the minds of these people who have committed these crimes and just wonder and figure out why it happened, how it happened, what caused the initial reasoning to do something like this. And it's also something that a lot of people are trying to avoid talking about right now because, unfortunately, you know, being a citizen of the United States myself and knowing that we are getting many mass shootings practically like on a weekly basis, it's a sad thing. And now with the new movie Joker out in theaters, that's another thing that people want to really dive into to see how the mind of a killer develops and what causes those reactions. So I think that that's what makes it all so interesting, because there's just so much curiosity, because here are these people who are just so innocent, so kind, and yet they suddenly discover that there are people in this world that can basically do a complete 180 and become those kinds of people. Why does that happen? That's pretty much the intrigue. So for me, when I discovered the first horror novel that I read, I also did a lot of Goosebumps as well. I read those books. I loved them. And I think that one of the best things that's interesting about Goosebumps is I always admire authors or anybody else that creates media in the horror genre for children slash families, because that's such a challenge. How do I give this the right amount of scary with the right amount to not make sure that these kids are not sleep deprived for a decade? You're like, how do I do that? And that's why I think R.L. Stine was such a genius in regards to doing so. And I also give so much props to when film directors who direct many things that are only for adults, and then they decide to go and do a child's movie. Because I just watched, I don't know if you've seen it or if you're a fan or not, but I just watched A House with the Clock in Its Walls by with Jack Black and Kate Blanchett. And I absolutely loved it. I had such a good time with it. But the thing that made me so interested in that movie was the fact that it was directed by Eli Roth. And when you think
Oh, I
about
didn't know
Eli,
it was really
yeah, Eli Roth directed it. So like when you think Eli Roth, you think Hostel, you think Green Inferno. So I was like, how is he going to tone this down? Like, I got to see this guy try and do this. But he did it. He gave me because one of the few things that he does very well is he gives you great characters regardless of the scenarios. Even in a movie like Hostel, it's like you liked these characters. You felt bad for these characters that were suffering. So the fact that he actually dives into a child-friendly atmosphere and still manages to give you that right amount of creepy but that right amount of fun, I personally think that it was a job well done. And if he made another movie in that kind of style, I would be very, very welcome to seeing what he would do.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely didn't know. I've only ever watched like Hostel and Green Inferno by him. I wouldn't think that he would dive into a child's market, If it
Well,
works,
you
it
know,
works.
well, think about it this way. If Martin Scorsese can make a movie like Goodfellas and then go make a movie like Hugo, the sky is the limit.
Yeah.
So that's always a very interesting thing to see. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I watched the movie twice because I just thought it was so fun. It also was Jack Black not doing the whole man-child performance that you would know him for. He definitely had a lot more of a maturity to him. And also him playing R.L. Stein in the Goosebumps movie was great. I loved him in that movie as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll have to start watching those then.
Yeah, I think that, I didn't see the second Goosebumps movie, but the first one, it had that fun. Like, if you were a fan, I always say that if you like Hocus Pocus,
Yeah.
Goosebumps and The House with the Clock in its Walls, it's got that feeling. So if you like Hocus Pocus, you'll love those two films as well. And it's hard to find someone I know that doesn't like Hocus Pocus at this point in time in my life. My wife loves that movie too.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh yeah, it's Bette Miller just having a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go into the third question, and this is an interesting one, because you came into BookTube pretty much in its infancy when your channel was created and you started bringing all of this interesting literature to the people that were watching. Did you think that your market was actually out there, or did you just feel that you wanted to take a chance and just do your own thing? Because this wasn't a time where people were really going into YouTube for the sake of trying to get everybody to like them. This was a time when people were just making videos because they wanted to make their content. So how did you feel when you were first making your own? Like, what was your intentions, and were you specifically trying to cater to anybody specifically?
Well, when I started my BookTube channel, I was actually unemployed, so I was very bored. Um, and I didn't go into BookTube with the thought of even making money. It wasn't one of those like, oh, I want to make some cash. I didn't even like think of it as like this is my brand or anything like that. There was no sort of like marketing behind it. I was just bored and I wanted to make some videos. I also knew that like at the time with BookTube, there was really only very techy YA booktubers at the
Yeah.
time, or at least the ones that were the most prominent. So it took some digging, and then I was able to find like you and find a few others who aren't making videos anymore, um, who actually talked about books and other media that weren't totally in the mainstream. And it was a very nice community, I think, at that time, just because it was still in its infancy. But I certainly didn't go with the intention of I want to I want to cater to other people. I didn't really have like views in mind. I was like, I know maybe like 5 people are gonna watch my video, and hopefully 3 out of the 5 will enjoy what I have to say. But I also wanted to be transparent, and I didn't want to talk about subjects that didn't entice me and didn't excite me. I actually wanted to talk about things that I really enjoyed. So I would talk about horror, or I would talk about like post-mortem photography, I think was one of them. And it was just, I don't know, it was like a lot more pure, I think, at that time, if that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense. You know
No,
what I
it makes perfect sense because, you've been on somewhat of a hiatus, but I have been watching what's happening alongside with making the content that I've been making for. I still can't get over the fact that next year will be my 10th year making content.
Wow.
And I definitely have seen a massive change in the tides. And I think that it is very unhealthy, if you want my personal thoughts. I don't like the fact that, and it's not just what's happening in YouTube, it's what's going on with everybody in a society. I always say that the way to describe what's happening right now is people are trying to encase, especially the younger people in this world, we're trying to encase them in bubble wrap. We're trying to let them know that the world is a safe place, everybody's happy, everybody is, barfing rainbows and farting unicorns. Like, everybody just thinks that it's supposed to be this great, grand, happy place. But no, the world is not a good place. The world is challenging, the world is tough, and if you don't want to try and fight these hurdles and try to overcome these obstacles, then you truly will never understand what it is to live life. I mean, that's what I did. I had a family who basically said to me, you know, life is hard, get a helmet. So that's basically how I have lived. And when it comes to the content, I just really get upset when I hear that people are trying to just put on these fake personas just for the sake of getting views. And even though I think it's very healthy that there are people that are trying to find an outlet to let their voices be heard, and more importantly, a lot of people right now are trying to find friends, because one of the few things that I will give YouTube credit for is I never would have imagined that it would be a possible way for people to actually communicate with each other and actually make friendships. I mean, the fact that a YouTuber that I know is now my dentist. I mean, I never thought in a million years that YouTube would be the place where I would actually find somebody like that. I have made a great deal of friends who I've actually met in person, who have met my wife, and we all get along beautifully. But I still feel that there are people that are just trying to come at this with very self-centered intentions for the sake of acceptance, so they can just grow their channel and try and get more ad revenue. I mean, do I have anything against the fact that I make money off of YouTube videos? It's not my day job. It's not. But I also do believe that you are investing so much money into what you do on your channel, it doesn't hurt to get a little bit of a reward for all the work that you put into it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think with trying to cater to the masses, and if that's not what you're feeling, it's kind of like selling your soul, and that's really not what I'm here for. Like, that's why I don't really talk about, or that's why I don't make videos about like current discussions on BookTube, because like that doesn't like, you know, spark joy, so to speak. I would
Yeah.
just, you know, keep doing what I'm doing, which I know doesn't really get like a ton of views, but at the very least, I'm content with what I'm doing. And I know I'm not like, you know, oh, I have to make myself happy and peppy and like talk about something that I really don't care about just so I can get like a couple thousand extra views. It's
Yeah.
kind of dumb to me, but
Yeah, I mean, like, look, do I talk about a lot of mainstream stuff on my channel? Sure, but that's just because of the fact that these are actually things that I'm interested in. I mean, I didn't review Spider-Man Far From Home because everybody else reviews Spider-Man Far From Home. I was like, no, I reviewed Spider-Man Far From Home because, one, I read a ton of Spider-Man comic books. He's one of my favorite superheroes, and I wanted to see this movie and just give my own thoughts about it. I mean, I love the fact that nobody is talking about the new CGI Addams Family film, which I actually saw last week and had a fantastic time watching it. But that's just because of the fact that, you know, I'm a pop culture junkie, and like the Addams Family is iconic. So to see this new incarnation of the family with a great cast, of course I wanted to see the movie for the sake of seeing it. But I have no issue with the fact that when I bring music to my channel, I talk about heavy metal. I know that that's something that nice, happy, peppy people don't like to listen to because they think it's the devil's music. But I just like say, you know, if you just give it a try, you'd be impressed with what you might find, because listening to heavy metal does not conjure the spirits of the dead, or does it? I don't know what happens on Halloween, but I just listen to good music that I think is good music, and I have no shame in talking about that kind of stuff. And even when it comes to YA, you know, there are certain books that they have talked about that actually interested me. So did I read them? Sure. I thought that the concept of the Lunar Chronicles was one of the major things that everybody talked about. Yeah, I sort of wanted to see what it was all about, and the fact that it was like, you know, a science fiction take on fairy tales, and Cinderella was a cyborg, and Little Red Riding Hood was like a vigilante. I was like, that's cool. I like that kind of stuff. Like, I read Batman and stuff like that. That sounds like something I'd be interested in. Or this other series that a lot of people talk about, which is not YA, but Mistborn, I think is fantastic. I think the writing's brilliant, and I just love the story. I even met the author, and he's such a cool guy. I mean, anybody that comes to a convention wearing a Calvin and Hobbes t-shirt is an okay in my books. So I really appreciate some of the stuff, but it's never because of the fact that I want to be accepted. It's all about just reading and watching and listening to what you like and then talking about what you like.
Yeah, I've given up on trying to fit in a very long time ago. So like, yeah, if it happens to coincide, like if someone's talking or a bunch of people are talking about this one book and I read it and I love it, sure, that's great. But I never really go in with the intention of, please look at me, accept me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think that's also why I've taken so many hiatuses because you know, if there's like not as much engagement, it's like, well, then there's really like no point, you know, because right now BookTube is so oversaturated,
Yeah.
and people who are talking about horror have, you know, are not talking about their own niche horror. People who are talking about more transgressive lit have like their own niche. Everyone's very specific, whereas I feel like I'm very much all over the place. So there isn't like, you know, a market for me. So it kind of gets a bit frustrating. So yeah, there are times where I feel like not really needed here. Other people are doing good work. So I think just kind of watch from afar.
There you go. So the next question that I have for you is, because of the fact that even though you haven't really been around much, it seems to me like you actually have taken a bit of an understanding as to what BookTube is really turning into at this point in time. So did you ever have the thought about possibly going to the other side and doing a little bit more stuff in regards to mainstream?
No, hard stop. No, period. Nah,
You
not
know,
really.
I will be perfectly honest with you. You are the third person that just gave me a direct yes or no answer with regards to a question. So, you know something, that's not a bad thing in the slightest. The fact that you basically know exactly where you stand and you know how you feel about yourself and what you like and what you dislike, I commend you 100%. I truly do.
Thank you.
I mean, I think that one of the few things that, you know, when it comes to the BookTube community, one of the things that's actually happening right now in terms of mainstream is the fact that people are starting to read a lot of graphic novels.
Mhm.
And me personally, I just started going and collecting comic books again. I was a big comic collector when I was in my tweens and my teen years, and around college I stopped just because I was like trying to get into other interests and other hobbies and just left it by the wayside. But, you know, in a world right now where comic book movies are like the lifeblood of Hollywood, and it was when I went to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia this summer with my wife, and there was a special exhibit about Marvel, and not just the movies, we're talking about everything. So everything going back to 1938. So one of the things that was really interesting was they actually had some comics on display. So like I was seeing like the first Marvel Comics issue, the first Captain America issue, the first appearance of Spider-Man. And then there were some places later on in the exhibit where I was looking at some of the comic books that were on display, and I'd like tapped my wife on the shoulder. And I said to her, I have those. Like some of these comics are things that are, and then I'm like saying to myself, wait a minute, some of my comic books are like going on 25, 30 years old. That's crazy.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I gotta start collecting comic books again. So it's not just that, but I actually said, okay, I want to capitalize on a lot of the stories from my days of collecting. Like I want to finish some stories, reread some stories, really get into the nitty gritty of my childhood. But then I said to myself, what's been going on in comic books for the last 15, 20 years? I will say this. It's amazing, and it's dark. Very, very dark. Like, I said to people so many times in the last couple of months that when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I am not the biggest fan of the film Captain America Civil War.
Oh, okay.
So I finally read a little bit about the source material of that specific movie. And my goodness, that story is so different, so layered, and so incredible. I was like, oh man, if they would have just been a little bit willing to just take that extra step and go a little bit darker, it would have been such a much better film. I think it would have, but it's Disney, so they got to be family friendly. I think the funny part was when I was saying, wow, that original source material makes Captain America Civil War like a Disney movie. Then I said, wait a minute, it is a Disney movie. But yeah, I don't really talk much about comic books on my channel per se, because I just don't want to constantly take them out, put them back in, because, you know, I still don't want to damage them. Like, they're still valuable to me.
Yeah.
But I do like to go onto Twitter and talk about them and tell people what I've been reading and how I've been feeling about them. And I just feel that that's something that needs to be done more so. Not necessarily just talking about the current stuff, but really going back into the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, because that's where some of the best stories have been. And the same could be said for other things. It's like the fact that everything that's being discussed right now is just the new, the popular, and the exciting. It's like, if I'm going to go do a review of Casablanca on my channel, is anyone even going to watch it? Does everybody even know that films were actually being made before 1980? Do people know that they were in black and white? I don't know. But I feel that there definitely needs to be more people to let people know, especially people who are oblivious to really trying to do their own digging, to really know what's out there. That's why I always appreciated who you were and what you did, because you're letting people know that there's a whole world here that you probably never even knew existed. Come explore it with me for a little while. You might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fifth question is something that we've sort of been talking about a little bit, but now I think we'll really go a little deeper into it. So you took your break, and then, like you said, when you came back and you took a look around, you said that the whole atmosphere has changed. And as far as I'm concerned, based on what we've been discussing through undertones, not necessarily for the better. So do you feel a little bit weirded out or nervous about the ultra-sensitive lynch mobs that could possibly be coming after you if they ever saw what you have on your channel? And do you feel that it's a little hypocritical that these people are also doing readathons about smut?
It's really funny. I'm a very socially conscious person in my day-to-day life. I'm incredibly empathetic. I really do care about people and issues all around the world. But when it comes to literature, that goes out the window. I feel like literature is a complete and total escape. Well, not really an escape for one, but for two, it's a learning experience. So I'm not really worried about anyone trying to come after me, to be honest. Like, for one, I'm not really active on Twitter, as you know. I maybe tweet every once in a blue moon. I don't really put myself into discussions. Like, whenever there's like a brand new controversial discussion going on BookTube, which is every week there's a new drama, I don't really include myself in that. So I'm not incredibly worried of like anyone discovering my channel and being mad. Like, if they are, they can drop a dislike. That's cool. But otherwise, if you're trying to like censor what I read, I think that's incredibly hypocritical, because we can all read what we read. There are months, there's actually weeks out of the year where we celebrate, or not really celebrate, sorry, but we acknowledge banned books, books that were challenging, books that had offended people, but still are regarded as great works of literature, still are regarded as great, what is it called? Like a great character piece. I don't know. I'm not worried, and even if I had someone come after me because of what I read, it's like, well, that's kind of weird. We live in a world where we can definitely read whatever we want to read, especially like in North America. Like, we don't really have to censor ourselves. So I don't know why anyone would want to kind of come after me or censor what I read, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And it's so funny that you're absolutely right. We have the ability to be free people and read what we want to read, but it's amazing how there are a small group. And yes, the truth is, they're not a massive amount of people. It's a small amount of people, but they have a very, very loud voice. And they're trying to find ways to censor what people are doing when it comes to things that they don't like, because they prefer to be in the echo chamber. They prefer to be with the like hive mind, if you will. And this whole new fad that they have that's called cancel culture, where if they don't like what this person is doing, well, that person doesn't exist. Yeah, that really doesn't help you in regards to growing as a person. And I always say, you know, never underestimate the power of dumb people in large groups. And it's kind of funny what happens when people like that actually try to get together. Now, I'm not saying that they're the only ones. Believe me, if you want to draw that line in the sand, on the other side, you got whack jobs like that too. I mean, for crying out loud, you got people on the left side, you got people on the right side that all want, and they all want to ban Harry Potter. When you're talking about banned books, believe it or not, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Harry Potter is on the banned books list to a certain degree. There are people that don't want America's youth to read it because they think that they're going to conjure up the dead, or as Bart Simpson liked to call them, the living impaired. But it's so funny how, you know, just because of the fact that somebody reads something that's not to your specific liking, it doesn't make them any less of a decent human being. I mean, I think that the best part about having differing opinions is the ability to talk about those types of opinions and express the ideas to one another. And if you end up disagreeing at the end of the conversation, the most important thing is that you walk away from each other as just good people. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not hard to be a decent person and
No, it's not.
understand other people's sides of thinking. Like for me, I you know, like I said, like I'm incredibly socially conscious. I'm always like, when I'm like ready to vote because the federal elections in Canada are coming up literally tomorrow. There's always this hot button, hot takes right now where everyone is like at each other's throats. And even though like my political views are so vastly different from like a lot of people that I know and that I'm related to, I still love them because they're still really good people at their core. So it's just like when I see these discussions on BookTube, which again, like they're kind of few and far between, but when I see them, I like roll my eyes because why are we making this an issue? Like there are certain things that happen on BookTube where I'm like, is this really like a cause for concern? Can we just like make one video about it and then like move on, not try to make a whole movement and then try to cancel somebody for it? I think that's like total BS. Like let's just kind of do our own thing, which is be a community. That I feel like sense of community is a bit strained at times in the BookTube sense.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you there. And have I ever been afraid of people coming after me in regards to what I say? You know something? At the beginning, I was a little bit nervous about it, but then I really felt comfortable expressing myself because the other thing is I know that the people who watch me are people that know me, people that understand me, and more importantly, people that respect me because of the fact that I never try to be condescending in what I'm saying, unless I had a really, really bad day and I throw something out there. It's not necessarily something that I truly feel 100%, because when you're riding on emotions and they're high beyond belief, you're gonna sometimes just have the proverbial diarrhea of the mouth and completely not even realize what you said. Thank God, as long as you don't record them live, there is the editing button, so you can decide whether you want that video to come out or if you just want to keep it within your own confines and your own privacy. But yeah, same with you. My digital footprint is relatively small. I mean, I like to talk on Twitter, and the reason why I like to talk on Twitter a lot is because the people that I do talk to who do follow me, I always get a good conversation out of them. I love it. I just love the fact that the people who know me will reach out to me and they'll just start talking to me about it. And I love it because, even if we agree or disagree, we always just have a good, rational conversation because we all know at the end of the day, we're friends. We're not trying to offend each other, but I'm curious to know what you feel, and I'm sure you're curious to know how I feel. And, you know, Facebook is also a thing that I do have, but I'm not really as active on it, and I don't really make it known to my subscribers. You and I happen to be friends on Facebook because there has been a very long-standing friendship between the two of us, and there was also a true sense of trust. Like, I really believe that I did not feel nervous about having you friend me because I felt that you were a good person. We had talked many times, and I just felt that getting to grow the friendship a little bit was a good thing. And the fact that we've still been in touch, regardless of the fact that I've been making more content and you really haven't, I'm just glad to know that the friendship's still stuck, and the fact that we say hello to each other, find out how everything is going. And when times are tough, you know, I'm willing to be the friendly ear. And that's one of the few things that I feel is lacking right now. And the fact that social media is sort of supposed to bring us together, but it's at the same time driving us apart. It's like the ultimate hypocrisy, and it's kind of scary yet humorous all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
So the sixth question that I have for you is, do you feel that the literature that you read is something that more people really should read? And not necessarily whether they like it or not, but do you just feel, because you literally just answered the question, do you truly believe, like myself, that people just need to loosen up already?
I don't know if it's about loosening up, but I'm certainly not here to dictate what people should and shouldn't read. But I always invite people to take a trip on the other side, if that's not what they're really accustomed to. Most of my viewers who watch any of the videos and reviews that I do normally tend to have the same likes and the same, I suppose, the same tastes as I do. But for anyone else, I would invite them to maybe read a book that is so outside of their comfort zone just to see how it's like. And it could be really anything, because most of the books that I really enjoy reading are based in real life and they are a character study. So even though the characters or character is deplorable, the things that they do is absolutely horrible, isn't it kind of interesting that they're just kind of like you in a way? Like, they're also human like you, right? Like, but the only difference is that they're acting on their darker impulses. And I think to an extent, I think a lot of us are kind of voyeuristic in that way. We might have like a vice kind of to want to know more about things that are a lot darker. I think that's why there's a resurgence right now with a lot of true crime. People love true crime right now. Like on Netflix, there's like that Ted Bundy series, there's Mindhunter, there's a ton of true crime stuff. And I think that kind of also feeds into it. People, I think, naturally gravitate towards things that are darker, but I think a lot of people don't want to publicly admit it because they're afraid of what other people are going to think of them, what people are going to say about them. But I'm completely shameless, like, big deal. I will read a book about a psycho yuppie who may or may not have killed a ton of people. Big deal. I don't think that there's anything wrong with broadcasting that. And if you're still not sure about reading things that are darker, things that are weird, I would just say try to like just give it a try. Just kind of see what's out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really good stuff out there, a lot of things that are mainstream because they might be really good, but if you just kind of flip it on its head and read something that maybe an inversion or a perversion of what you just read, I think you might like it. And if you don't take it too seriously, it might kind of open your eyes to reading darker things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know.
I mean, I think that what's very interesting is there are a couple of people, even some of the people in the BookTube community that do read a lot of the YA and read the manga and whatnot. I've been seeing a lot of people really trying to look into Stephen King now, which I think is very interesting. And that's obviously because of the fact that, you know, It has been the big movie. And I always wanted to read that book. So to a certain degree, it was sort of BookTube that pushed me to finally read that book. And I think that it's the greatest book in my opinion. I love that book. I read it twice and I love the films. I think that they're very, very good adaptations based on what you could do for cinematic value. But I'm glad to know that there are people that are doing that. I'm also now suddenly seeing a lot of videos of people reading classic horror. A lot of people have been reading Frankenstein and Dracula and The Mummy. I'm just glad to know that there are people that are willing to maybe not go to the darker parts where you and others that I know like to explore, but the fact that they're just taking baby steps, if you will, to just try and break out of the norm that is in the community right now and just do something to stand out. I think that that's a really good thing. And, you know, the fact that someone who is scare easy is willing to actually sacrifice that fear to just try and see what this is all about. I mean, that's basically what it is all about. The curiosity is what leads you down these paths. If you are just going to keep depriving yourself, even though you know that these are things that might be something that you like, you know, there's nothing wrong with taking that step and going on that journey. I mean, you know, something I went in the completely opposite direction. I always knew that Twilight was a bad thing, but I went to watch those movies because I just had to see what that hype was all about. And thank goodness it gave me an excellent April Fool's video. And then I decided to punish myself again and watch all 3 Fifty Shades of Grey movies so I could do the exact same thing. And let me just tell you something. It was torture. It was sheer torture, probably more torture than anything that even shows torture in a film. And I've seen every single Saw movie that has ever been made and love them. But yeah, luckily the videos that were produced from them were fantastic, and I'm happy about that. But yeah, horror is something that I never really thought was something I would really like. And little by little, I am going in and watching all of these movies and reading some of these books. And I don't know when, but I have a feeling that I will watch the 1930s Universal monster movies. I've never seen them. I know that they are the greats, you know, the great actors like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Like, I know these people, Lon Chaney, I know these names. These are, even though I've never seen the movies, this is pop culture at its finest, you know? And one of the few things that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and hopefully my friend Cammie and I will get around to doing this, but we've been wanting to have a live conversation where we talk about the evolution of the horror film, how it started with the Universal movie monsters, and then it became one note with the slasher films, but now it's going into a very interesting direction with movies like It Follows, or movies like some of the more recent things that came out like Us and Get Out. These are movies that are scary but have such a message within them that is so deep that I feel that horror is really trying to become a much more viewer or reader friendly element that more people are now finally starting to dive into and explore, because they're now discovering there's a lot of interesting things here to explore, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those movies that you mentioned, like Get Out and Us, have a deeper political sort of message in them, and it kind of shows you that the true horror is truly peaceful.
Yeah,
really. I mean,
and then you have a horror fan's wet dream like Cabin in the Woods. Let's get all those things that scare somebody into one movie in the craziest and most clever way possible.
Yeah, I love Joss Whedon, and I saw that movie with my husband, and I didn't even know what it was about. Didn't even watch any of the trailers, and I was stunned. It was by far like one of like
Yeah.
my most favorite
Yeah,
movies.
because it starts out like that typical cliche horror movie, and
Yeah,
then that twist is given to you that would make M. Night Shyamalan crap his pants in delight because he couldn't get over the fact that he didn't come up with it first.
yeah, absolutely. I think with
So,
sorry, no, go ahead.
no, no, what were you going to say? I got to hear what you got to
Oh, I was
say.
just gonna say with M. Night Shyamalan, with The Sixth Sense, he actually got that idea from an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
Yeah, I actually think
Yeah,
I knew that.
yeah. No, I just thought it was funny that you like mentioned him and that he was like, oh, crapped himself because he probably didn't think of it first. But I mean, he did steal one of.
Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, and yeah, and I can't finish this topic of discussion right now without mentioning another great horror movie that I recently watched, and that was John Krasinski's A Quiet Place. That was truly something different and something special. I was so impressed with that movie. Very impressed.
Absolutely. I think two other ones that were so amazing from last year and this year were Ari Aster's Hereditary and Midsummer. Those were
Yeah, I'm terrified of what those movies are. I'm really scared of those two movies. I got to admit.
they were so good. Very Midsummer was very anxiety driven. So if you're somebody who has any anxiety or like what is that word? When like too many things are kind of coming at you at the
Oh, it's like massive pressure and stuff like that.
something like that. Oh, I can't remember. Now that I'm like talking to you, I can't
No,
remember
it's
what.
okay.
But those movies are fantastic. They're some of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah, and a lot of people I know have actually said a lot about them. Good things, as a matter of fact. So that will bring us to the final question, especially considering the fact that we're getting to the end of our hour pretty much. And this is a question that I really created just because of the fact that I have been a loyal follower of your work, and I always get excited when you just pop up, just out of nowhere. You stay within your true element. You give me the proverbial welcoming jump scare, if you will. So the question is, where does the future stand in terms of this kind of literature that you read? And more importantly, yourself as a creator, where do you stand? Like, will we ever see you back again? I mean, one of the few things that I purposely, there's a little bit of an intention here. I wanted you to come on to my show because I just wanted you to see that there are people out there that did appreciate everything that you've done. And I'm sure most of us, me included, we all want you to come back at some point in time because we just appreciate the originality that you bring to us and the intrigue in the work that you present. So, will YouTube have a future with you in it?
Maybe. I don't know. It's been a bit of a tumultuous relationship. It's been this constant push and pull of I want to come back. No, I don't want to come back. Screw this place. BookTube sucks. And then I'm like, oh, I miss BookTube so much. So it's a very tumultuous relationship. But not only that, the sheer energy it takes to kind of put myself
Yeah.
in front of a camera for me is a lot. Like it takes a lot out of me. I think there's people who are very naturally charismatic. They love talking to the camera, and I love that energy. I just don't have that energy, so for me, it's a lot more difficult. And as you probably can notice, I ramble when I don't know what I'm saying, or when I don't really have a set like script in my head of what I want to say. I just kind of
Makes two of
ramble,
us.
yeah, or I totally blank. So it makes filming that much more challenging, and then I get frustrated with myself because my first take wasn't good, so I have to do a second one. Oh, that one wasn't good. Do a third one, and then it just kind of gets frustrating to the point where I'm like, well, if I'm not perfect at it the first time, I don't want to do it ever again. So it's more of a me problem, but it's also just a tumultuous booktube relationship. So I would like to come back, and I mean, I read a lot of really great books that I really want to talk about because they're not represented on this website. So it would be fun to talk about, but it's just kind
Yeah.
of a matter of getting over that hurdle.
I understand. I mean, look, I'll tell you the God's honest truth. I may look like, when I present a video to the people that watch me, like, people might think that for me it's the easiest thing in the world, but I got to tell you the truth. This year was the hardest year for me as a content creator. There were days where I was very frustrated, wanted to quit because I just was having a very, very, very small amount of fun. Like, I used to just love it. I really did. But there was a lot of outside pressure on me because new homeowner, marriage, new things happening at work, and life always comes first.
Mhm.
So to get out there and try and record was so burdensome for me at certain points in time. And it even got to the point where one of my good friends was actually saying to me, "What's going on with you?" She's like, "That fire that I see in your videos is gone. Is everything okay?" I didn't even realize that I was presenting that kind of a persona. And it made me feel a little bit weird, and it really made me go back within to really see what's been going on. And, I've always been saying this, it's like all good things will come to an end. And I'm just hoping that, when the day comes that I decide to just stop being a constant creator, that the torch will be passed on to a good group of people out there that are just as enthusiastic like myself and just enjoy talking about what they do. Because there are two specific videos of yours that I love to death. And one of them is the video series that you did about American Psycho. I loved that. I wanted I wanted more. I wanted more fictional characters and psychoanalysis. I just was you interested me in that. I won't lie. It was because I saw American Psycho years ago, and to the point I didn't even realize that was Christian Bale, because I had no idea who Christian Bale was. The only person I knew in that movie was Reese Witherspoon at the time, because she was the it thing. But Christian Bale was fantastic in that movie. I will laugh every single time I watch him hack that guy to death while listening to It's Hip to Be Square, because I'm a huge Huey Lewis fan. I'm a huge Huey Lewis fan.
I love Huey Lewis in the news. Yeah.
So I really was begging for more of that, because I wanted to see somebody take more of these fictional characters and just rip them to shreds and explore, but we didn't get that, unfortunately. And
Maybe one day.
and when you quoted that passage from that story/poem Bear, I almost wet myself because I couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
And that was during the tumultuous time in the climate where the drama was really starting to build up and fester in the community. And here you are reading this passage, and I'm like, wow, bravo, she's doing this. And I don't know who's watching this, but someone is imitating Curly from the Three Stooges right now, because they can't get over the fact that someone's talking about this on YouTube. And this person is very upset right now. Good.
To my defense, I'm very tone deaf to what's going on BookTube, so I didn't even know what was happening. I just kind of did my own thing.
Well, in regards to YouTube, for me, it's very much like the Kardashians. I'm not interested in what's going on with this, but it manages to find me some way, somehow, and unfortunately, I have to find out what's going on because someone has to tell me what's going on. And I'm like, yay, that's all that I needed right now. I'm going to go there now and do something else.
Yeah.
But anyway, that actually brings us to the end of our hour. This was a fantastic discussion, Hannah. I'm really glad that you were willing to take the time to sit down and discuss this topic with me. I really appreciated what you had to say, and I'm really hoping that when this video does go up on my channel tomorrow, which is going to be Monday, the 21st of October, at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I really hope that people will take something away from it and really start to look within themselves and realize, even people who don't do the same things that I do, they're not so bad. They're cool.
Hopefully. Well, thank you so much for having me and taking time out of your busy day. So,
of course. I appreciate that. So I actually, speaking of busy day, I actually have to go finish up my editing of my Gnome docs. But everybody, thank you very much for joining us for this great conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all for the next one, where we, of course, have a brand new topic to discuss, but more importantly, as always, another great YouTuber to discuss it with. Thank you all for watching and have a safe Halloween, everyone. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.